Hi, my name is Rhonda Levine from the Galen Center for Professional Development. I will be your tour guide for this just-in-time learning session surrounding purpose and navigation of Engage, specifically focusing on the status page. For those of you who may not know, Engage is an electronic web-based platform for the coordination and management of nurse development resources, most commonly referred to as NDR. In addition, as a partner organization, your hospital may have requested specific content to be added to Engage. For example, organizational and unit-specific competencies and/or curriculum modules. Engage also supports links to additional electronic platforms used at your organization, such as Lippincott or Mosby's Policy and Procedures, so all information assigned to a learner can be seamlessly accessed in Engage. Simply put, Engage provides an electronic validation and documentation of assigned competencies and learning modules using dashboards and a notes section that enables easy assessment of progress and creates a transparency among nurse leaders, preceptors, and nurses who are assigned content within Engage. Let's get started with our tour. Most of the action occurs on the status page. The view is the same for all roles, nurse leaders, preceptors, and nurses who have been given assignments. The top of the screen indicates the name of the nurse, their hospital, their primary clinical unit, and the role they've been assigned in Engage. Click on the name of the resources under Hospital Resources to access other electronic platforms. Sometimes after clicking on a link, you may be asked to provide your username and password for a different electronic platform used at your hospital. This will be the same username and password you would use if logging in directly from that website. The following sections, benchmark validation status, competency validation status, and further down the screen, module progress, are assigned specifically to the user's needs. What I mean by this is only nurses that are in transition, such as new graduate nurses, experienced nurses new to the organization, and nurses transitioning to new areas of practice, are assigned benchmarks. If you are using benchmarks, click on the In Progress link to view the 11 benchmark categories. When you see a small blue circle with an eye in the middle, this represents an information box. By clicking on the information box, the user can quickly see the criteria expected for demonstration to successfully be validated. As a nurse leader and a preceptor, you're able to validate benchmarks by simply clicking on the Validate button, reviewing the criteria. You have the opportunity to select all, and then go ahead and choose the status. Once validated, you move to the bottom of this screen. You may want to enter a specific note or add an attachment, the same way you'd add an attachment to an email. Click Save for real-time validation and update of progress. By moving back out to the status page, we can then look at competency validation. In the competency validation section, all competencies assigned to the learner are listed. Mentioned earlier, there may be organizational competencies or unit-specific competencies or competencies assigned through nurse development resources. To validate a competency, click on the title. Competency groups house more than one competency, and you can click on the title here to go ahead and select all, choose the status, of the competency, document the validation method, and choose the level of performance. Once again, you're able to edit the date or type in a free text note specific to this particular competency. Notice you also have blue information boxes here that define each of the levels of performance. By clicking on the status page on the left navigation bar, you're able to return back and move on to the next. Each nurse in transition is assigned a self-assessment for the competencies they're expected to demonstrate. In order for the nurse leader or the preceptor to validate a competency, the nurse who is assigned the competency must complete a self-assessment. If the self-assessment is not completed, validation cannot occur, as the boxes are inactive. Under Critical Care Focus, you can see there are 2 competencies assigned within this particular group, and Engage automatically prompts users for next steps. Once again, you can see here the competency self-assessment must be completed before the nurse leader and the preceptor can validate the competency. As we return to the status page and move down the screen, we can look at module progress. Transition nurses, when clicking in to the topic, have active links behind the modules. Currently, we're logged in as a preceptor, and as a preceptor, I don't have the ability to click in and review the modules from this section. Should I, as a nurse leader or a preceptor, want to look at the detail of a module by clicking on Menu at the top and going to the Content Catalog, this is where you're able to review modules provided by Nurse Development Resources. Let's take a look at evidence-based practice. In clicking on the title, I can move down the screen. I see that there are 2 choices within this module group, and when I click on evidence-based practice, I then have an active link to review the interactive vignette, the practice application. These particular links are seen directly from the nurse who has modules assigned to them under their module section. One of our last sections to review is the Notes section. When clicking on Notes, this is really designed to be a communication center among nurse leaders, preceptors, and transition nurses. Each role can write and read 3 types of notes entered into Engage. Remember, notes can be attached to benchmarks, competencies, or placed in this General Notes section. Most partners use this section for documentation of transition nurse progress and any action items they'd like to see completed. This particular note welcomes Jeff to the clinical unit and has been entered by the nurse leader. Other notes, for example here, is attached specifically to a benchmark. Here it outlines what the focus should be for Jeff and that he's on track, but we still want to make sure that he pays attention to a couple more things before we actually validate him. The last thing we want to talk about is the Bedside App. This is accessed from the left navigation bar and provides quick evidence-based practice references for the competency and modules associated with nurse development resources. 2 formats are provided: point of care algorithms and references at a glance. Algorithms provide a decision-making tree based on the topic that it's reviewing to help prompt critical thinking for the nurse. By using binary logic, it asks a series of questions that helps the nurse to think through the evidence-based practices for this particular topic. Opposed to references at a glance, which are really more of a down and dirty review to make sure all information is included in your decision making. A review of the topic with a table to make sure you've included all evidence-based practice recommendations to provide the best possible outcomes for your patients. The last section under the Bedside Apps are calculations. This is to help nurses solve commonly used medication calculations and come up with dosages. One of the nice items about this particular calculation is that the formula is always given at the bottom of the screen to reinforce learning. Those of us working at the Galen Center for Professional Development hope you find this Engage overview helpful. Galen wants to thank all of you for the work that you do, and most importantly, remember, the nation's health depends on nursing.